Welcome to the Garage, ladies and gentlemen, the Court of Public Opinion. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Gary's here. Pete is here. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Jeremy.
With a glass of wine. I'll have one with you later. Remembrance Day today. Don't forget to buy a poppy and wear a poppy. The 11th of the 11th month. Also, of course, the 50th anniversary of the dismissal. The day back in 75 when the worst government, in most people's living memory anyway, was sacked by the Governor-General. But that's history. Yeah. You celebrating your birthday? No?
Not really, no. I'm hoping on a phone call tonight from a lady.
A lovely lady. Okay, all right. Where do we start with the events of the week? It's been an eventful week. Let's start with John Laws. At the age of 90, he's gone to the big studio in the sky. 71 years behind the golden microphone. Mind you, it wasn't always gold or golden. Blessed with a magnificent voice, he made the most of it. On air, a force of nature. Off air, strangely insecure. I never quite understood that. It seemed to me that he was always trying to prove something to others and himself. A most interesting man, a complicated man. I looked up to him enormously, as I think a whole generation of radio people did. I knew him at 2GB. He was the young drive-time disc jockey, fresh down from Newcastle. And I was the 16-year-old office boy, the dog's body, who would go and run his messages and do his dry cleaning, get his shoes from the shoemaker and all that stuff. That's what office boys do. There are thousands of stories. And Friday, on the live streaming show, I'll tell you a few of them, Jerry Lister, who was a great mate of his, will join us with a unique insight into the man. JeremyCordeaux.com, Friday morning, 9 o'clock, 0491 65 68 60. The Libs will decide and announce their net zero policy this week. Wow! Firstly, net zero is impossible. Net what? Can't happen. An invention. Doesn't exist. So what are they deciding? Political damage, I think. Nothing to do with the environment. Anthony Albanese says, we're concentrating on the cost of living while those opposite are concentrating on themselves. Great line. Clever line. But rubbish. Because Labour's renewables policy is responsible for the cost of living problems. But how stupid are the Liberals to get themselves into this spectacle of indecisive procrastination? Ridiculous. Look, right now, off the top of my head, no, well, not quite, because I thought of it a while ago, I can give the Libs a winning election slogan. Vote for us and make electricity cheap again. How about that? Yeah. Vote for us and make electricity cheap again. What's the argument? The Brits have dropped net zero. The US, China, India, Russia, the big emitters. Who's in favour? What's the point? The people who are in favour of net zero are a handful of backward, ill-informed, poor countries who are, of course, left of centre. People who are easily led, economic basket cases, love slogans and misinformation. I could trot out a conservative expert who would agree with me on climate change. But you might expect that. But here is a man who co-founded green politics in the world. Green politics as we know it. or knew it. Listen carefully, ladies and gentlemen. His name is Dr. Patrick Moore.
One of my missions is to turn on its head the idea that carbon dioxide is a pollutant and somehow dangerous, when in fact it is the most important nutrient for all life on Earth, and without it this would be a dead planet. So I say not only is carbon dioxide good, it is essential, and it's a good thing that we are putting some more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere because it was running low before we came along.
CO2, we know its benefits for plants, but it is a known greenhouse gas, and we're pumping too much of it in, leading to global warming.
Well, actually, it may be a known greenhouse gas, but it's not known how strong it is in terms of changing the Earth's temperature. And so far in this century, there has been zero warming from a statistically significant basis, and the UK Met Office says so. Yet 1/3 of all human CO2 emissions have been put into the atmosphere in the last 18 years. So it doesn't look like a lockstep causal relationship between increasing CO2 and warming of the Earth.
Are you seriously suggesting we should be pumping more stuff in, polluting the Earth more, building more coal-fired power stations just so we can make sure that the CO2 levels are good?
No, I'm not, because we're putting plenty of CO2 into the atmosphere. We don't need to do it this quickly, but if we bring it up to a higher level than it is today, we will get immediately an increase in the growth of crops and trees, which is not a bad thing. In the long run, though, it doesn't matter if we bring it down quite a bit, and so that's why I'm supportive of nuclear energy and of natural gas. This tendency to go in the rich countries to wind and solar is a giant waste of money. Those wind farms will rust in place, and there is no fun to decommission them when they either wear out or we decide how ridiculous it is to spend so much money for so little electricity that isn't even reliable.
What are you saying about energy policy now to the ideas of decarbonisation to cut? Is everyone wrong?
Yes, they're wrong if they are actually basing their energy policy on decarbonisation. They're not wrong to base their energy policy on cost effectiveness, on pollution control, which is why moving from coal to gas makes sense if you have it. But India has coal, and India has 300 million people with no electricity. What do we expect them to do? Of course they're going to build coal plants, but India is also building a lot more nuclear plants than the UK is right now, and it doesn't have the emissions of a coal plant. And China is building huge hydroelectric dams, which don't have the emissions of coal plants. So many of these countries are doing their bit without wasting all this money on wind and solar energy, which is unreliable and prohibitively expensive in the long run.
Why is this consensus out there?
Look, if we had definitive proof that CO2 was causing serious problems and we could prove it, don't you think they would write that down on a piece of paper somewhere so people could read it? They don't have definitive proof, period, in science. I'm a student of the philosophy and history of science, and I know that the scientific method has not been applied in such a way as to prove that carbon dioxide is causing the Earth to warm.
Do you think in a few years, say 50 years from now, people go, that was a really stupid period in our history when we tried to change all our energy policies to cut this gas?
I am firmly of the belief that the future will show that this whole hysteria over climate change was a complete fabrication.
And speaking of such things, I'm sure you'll admit that that is undeniably profound, credible, and influential. But you would have known that Bell Bay, another uranium smelter, is in trouble, bailed out by the taxpayer last Wednesday. Why? Why would it be in trouble? Because of the high cost of electricity. And that's along with Tomico, the country's largest smelter. That was the week before. Can you see a pattern here? Labor is not only stupid in this area, it is in denial. They think they can tough it out. That's what they were doing with The Voice. They just ignored all of the evidence and the commentary. They ignored it. I don't understand it. I'm so sorry, by the way, for last Friday. We couldn't get to air with the live streaming program from around the dining room table. We connect to our live broadcast with a platform Well, for some strange reason last Friday morning, it didn't connect us to the internet. The technical people that we got to help us were in Germany, but they did the best they could. They said they'd get us there by 9 o'clock, and they didn't and couldn't or whatever. Anyway, it's fixed now, and they promise it won't happen again. My apologies. We just had to, ring up people and say, terribly sorry, we don't have a show. But technology is wonderful when it works. The Adelaide pageant, the largest in the Southern Hemisphere, just behind Macy's Christmas parade, I'm told. The biggest turnout here in Adelaide in 10 years. That's terrific. Have you heard of a word, vibe coding? Anybody?
No.
I've never heard of vibe coding. Well, it somehow turns up as the Collins Dictionary Word of the Year. Vibe coding. Whatever it means. I don't even know why we have a Word of the Year. I like this little story. Isaac Stein. He is a United States attorney, a state official, without any income because of the shutdown, which I believe, we're recording on Monday afternoon, but I believe the Congress and the Senate, they've put together something that'll fix the shutdown. But there he was, and I imagine still is, selling hot dogs on the street corner. Under his sign, hot dog stand, up the top it says shysters. That's the American expression, I think, for lawyer. Shysters. There he is in his dark business suit, white shirt, looking every bit the high-powered lawyer. Amazing, waving his tongs in the air, getting a crowd, and selling a lot of hot dogs. Wonderful. He may chuck the bureaucracy and start in private enterprise, who knows? Well, Colonel Sanders did. Monopoly's coming up 90 years old. Gee, the most successful board game ever. All about money, landlords, property, and capitalism. Invented in the Great Depression by a guy called Charles Darrow. It was originally called the Landlord's Game. He changed it to Monopoly. You would have thought that in the middle of a depression, capitalism would not have been a popular topic. Anyway. Now, 1 month on from yesterday, talking to you Tuesday here on Facebook from the garage in the Court of Public Opinion, the social media will ban kids under 16. That ban will kick in 1 month from yesterday. We'll talk more about that on Friday, 0491 65 68 60. I have no idea how they're going to do that. Anyway, the illegal or bootleg cigarette business, you may have heard, has surged by $4 billion this year to become the largest, most profitable criminal activity in the country. Government money from excise on smokes down from 14 billion. Can you imagine that? 14 billion they make out of people smoking cigarettes and killing themselves. So down from 14 billion to 7 billion. Ouch! No wonder they're getting interested, active. Speaking of money, the Libs in South Australia commit, well, I haven't seen it in writing or anything, but I believe they have committed to phasing out stamp duty. Stamp duty. And that would appeal to most of us in terms of real estate, residential real estate. A terrific move. It reminds me of the courage that Joe Bjelke-Petersen showed when he ditched death duties all those years ago. It resulted in a huge boost to the Queensland state economy, which they even enjoy to this very day. So yes, vote for it and do it. And it's funny, the less money government demands, the more money they collect. I know that's weird, counterintuitive. It's called the Laffer curve. Look it up, it's interesting. Labor doesn't understand that kind of thing, and they never will. They say, we need more money, not less. We couldn't afford to cut taxes. Well, going back when we actually did stuff in South Australia, back to the days of Tom Playford, the Premier's Department, I've told you the story before, the Premier's Department consisted of three people, one of whom was the Premier. Today, when we do little more than spin and build huge luxurious buildings for SA Ambulance, which I am assured, a couple of which you can actually see from space. But back to the Premier's Department. There are now, not three, there are 503 people. That's not including the Premier's personal staff, by the way. That's amazing. We can cut stamp duties, but we can't do it without sacking the police force. Oh, hell yes you can. Of course you can. Savings can be made state and federal, everywhere you look. 1,373 people are employed in the Prime Minister's Department. Can you believe that? What do they do? Now, this doesn't include the Prime Minister's personal staff. This is insane. Billions can be saved easily. They just have to want to do it. But the more people you employ, the government I mean, and the more people you get on welfare, the more these people will vote for you. You're just shoring up your future. That's all they're doing with our money. Give me a break. And how about that? Tesla shareholders have voted unanimously to support Elon Musk's giant pay rise. You know, this is not his salary. This is on top of, right? $1.5 trillion. 100, now let me think about that.
$1,000 million.
Yeah, it's $150,000 billion. On top of his existing salary, which I don't know what is. But gee whiz. Anyway, they voted for it. They did. Now, we're here for the Rising Sun, 60 Bridge Street at Kensington. They will look after you coming up to Christmas. If you've got a function coming up, do book early. Grant and Jackie will take very good care of you. And don't forget, if you're looking to sell a painting, you're running out of time with regard to Jim Elder on Melbourne Street at North Adelaide. He has one sale left before the end of the year. And that's going to be a Bobby Dazzler. And when you sell a painting through Jim Elder, Elder Fine Art Gallery, you are selling to the world. So you're guaranteed at the best possible price, but if you're not sure what it's worth, and you might change your mind when you get a valuation, just talk to Jim Elder. He'll tell you all about it. Now, happy birthday if you're having a birthday. Said happy birthday to Pete. Yeah. It is the 11th. 1918, World War I armistice. Of course, the 11th of the 11th. Signed by the Allies and Germany, comes into effect, and World War I hostilities end at 11 a.m., the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. There's a wonderful song. Do you know who did that? When Will They Ever Learn?
When will they ever learn?
When will they? Pete Seeger, I think it was. Pete Seeger. When will they ever learn?
Yeah, pretty sure it's Pete Seeger.
Yeah. The futility of war. And we've learned nothing. Australian bushranger and outlaw Ned Kelly is hanged at Melbourne Jail, 1880. What was his last line? Does anyone remember?
Such is life.
Yeah, such is life.
Such is life. Such is life. Could have been different, Ned. The Australian Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam, removed from office by Governor-General Sir John Kerr, first elected PM removed in 200 years. Liberal leader Malcolm Fraser sworn in as caretaker Prime Minister of Australia after the sacking of the Whitlam government by John Kerr. That was 1975, as you well know. Chrysanthemums were introduced to England from China in 1790. Sun Records release the single Great Balls of Fire by Jerry Lee Lewis, sells 1 million copies in 10 days. Great Balls of Fire. That was in 1957. This was when, music and radio and entertainment and teenagers and everything changed. Everything changed. I'm glad I grew up in that era. The Mayflower. The Pilgrims from the Mayflower make their first landing in America at Provincetown Harbour in Massachusetts, 1620. 1620. Van Gogh's Irises sells for a record $53.6 million at auction. Does anyone remember who bought it? Alan Bond.
Really?
Yeah. Alan Bond paid $53.6 million for a painting. At the time, the highest price for any work of art.